Hey guys, welcome to the video. Salt here. Today we're going to be going over the secondary Incarnon weapon, the Kunai. Now in our weapon series, I show a build that functions well with no external buffs, and so I leave it up to the viewer to make their own intelligent decisions in adding external buffs to that weapon. Things like, hey, Salt put viral on the weapon, but I'm going to be using Nourish, that gives me free viral, so maybe I'll use a different element, things like that. Okay, let's go into our little Salt cave here. We have the top commenter of the last video. It's Bumble Beaver. I actually had to add a little dot to his name because apparently Warframe considers the word bumble a profanity. First commenter of the last video, the okayest playa, and our recent supporters of Colonel Suro 6, Alfofo, and Toxic Sneeze. Thank you so much for your support. And of course, we're doing the Kunai Incarnon today. Let's go ahead and go down into the arsenal here. So the Kunai are throwing knives. Very similar to the Despair, actually, that we did a few days ago. Although they function differently as far as the Incarnon goes. Let's go into the build here. And we'll go over the unique and interesting things about the Kunai. So, the Incarnon mode, the projectiles are going to seek the heads of enemies. So it's going to get almost like a light homing effect that's going to try to headshot enemies. The Incarnon also gets increased multi-shot. The Kunai is considered a silent weapon, which is kind of unique. And it also has a unique mod for it, if I type in Kunai here, called Stockpiled Blight. It's probably pretty cool for the non-Incarnon mode, but for the Incarnon mode, magazine capacity doesn't really do anything for us. So that's why we're not using it here. All right, and that's pretty much like the unique and interesting things about the Kunai. The other thing about the Kunai that I didn't mention is that Galvanized Shot is multiplicative gun condition overload on the Kunai. And so you get a lot of value out of Galvanized Shot. Okay, let's go over the mods on the Kunai here. We're going to have Galvanized Diffusion for multi-shot. We're going to have Galvanized Crosshairs for critical chance. We're going to have Galvanized Shot for status chance and direct damage per status type affecting the target. Again, this is multiplicative on the Kunai. On the Incarnon mode specifically, I should say. On the non-Incarnon mode, it is not multiplicative. On the Incarnon mode, it is multiplicative. Lethal Torrent for fire rate and multi-shot. Creeping Bullseye for critical chance. Prime Target Cracker for critical damage. For elements, I was really going back and forth between using Viral and Blast, because if we go down to its Incarnon datasheet here, the datasheet says, and obviously this is not with, it's not including some of the multipliers you get, but without the multipliers, you know, the datasheet says it's 2500, which is kind of a high alpha weapon. It's a little bit on the cusp of being low alpha, but it's still a few thousand. I would say it's a high alpha weapon. And on high alpha weapons, Blast is actually quite good. So, you know, this is on the lower end of a high alpha damage weapon, and so Blast is still pretty decent, but Viral will also not be too bad either. So I was really going back and forth between the two. And finally, I just said, you know what? I'll tell people, I'll suggest to use Viral, but if you had a external Viral primer, like maybe you're using a Panzervault Pfeila, maybe you're using Nourish or something like that, then use Blast, because Blast is really cool. You get a lot of value out of the AoE of it. The individual dudes being hit, though, you'll see a lot more damage coming out of Viral. So, you know, one does more single target, one does more AoE damage. Okay. In the Exila slot here, we're going to be going for Lethal Momentum for projectile speed. And in the Arcane slot, we're going to be going for Secondary Deadhead. This is going to give us 360% flat damage, a plus 30% headshot multiplier, which is actually quite nice in the Kunai, because remember, this is homing in on people's heads specifically. And minus 50% weapon recoil, which that we don't really care about. We don't really need that. And that is how you build out the Kunai. Now let's go over the evolutions for the Kunai here. All right, the first evolution is nothing here. It's just that saying that you've unlocked it. Congratulations. The second evolution, these are both actually quite good. So the one I have on right now, I'll actually probably switch this, is Sage's Resolve. Increases base damage by plus 80, and with a channeled ability active, it's plus 100% multi-shot. Remember, the Incarnon mode actually gets above average multi-shot, so that's really nice for the Incarnon mode. Now, it does have the caveat where you only get that plus multi-shot with a channeled ability active. Otherwise, it's just plus 80 base damage. Let's look at the other one here. Swift Conclusion increases base damage by plus 70. Okay, so it's 10 less than the other one. But you get plus 200% damage to enemies below half health. Oh my goodness, that's really powerful too. So these are both really powerful buffs. If you're doing like a level cap run, I could really see the plus 200 damage to enemies below half health doing really nice, because at that point, enemies have enough health to actually not just get one shot. And so like you'll get some value out of Swift Conclusion. But you get a lot of value out of Sage's Resolve too, with just extra multi-shot. It's just that Sage's Resolve does have the condition that you have to have a channeled ability active. Not all Warframes have channeled abilities. And so for that reason, I think this is just pretty much an easy yes or no. Does your Warframe have a channeled ability? If the answer is yes, you use Sage's Resolve. If your Warframe does not have a channeled ability, then the answer is no, and you use Swift Conclusion. So for this video, because I'm using Inaros and I'm not planning to use any abilities, I'm just going to go on Swift Conclusion, but both of these are good. Okay, in the third evolution slot here, there's a couple of okay options. So there's Rapid Reinforcement for plus 50% reload speed. Reload speed helps the non-Incarnon mode, just because sometimes you'll have to reload to continue trying to get headshots. Although it only takes like 2 headshots to fill it up, so it's not really too bad. But reload speed also helps the transition into Incarnon, which is really nice. Okay, let's go to the other one on the other side here. Swift Deliverance, plus 50% projectile speed. This is really nice too. I already went with projectile speed on my Exilis, and so I don't feel like I need it here. I feel like I could just kind of bank on more reload speed. But, you know, it is technically kind of okay to have more projectile speed, so this is also an okay option. And in the middle one here, increase base magazine capacity by plus 10. It's not really a great one, just because it doesn't affect the Incarnon mode. It does make the non-Incarnon a little bit more spammable, so you can more easily get your Incarnon bar full without having to go for a reload. But, I mean, the reload's not really even that bad, though. So I don't think Extended Volley is very good. I feel like your options are either Rapid Reinforcement or Swift Deliverance. Me, personally, I'm going for Rapid Reinforcement. And in the fourth evolution slot here, I had to do a lot of testing on this because there was like a specific dude that was writing in a couple forums saying Death Trap Trigger does not work. It doesn't work. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So I go to the simulacrum. I tested it in the simulacrum and it worked in the simulacrum. And I'm like, okay, let me check actual in-game, because sometimes things will work in the simulacrum and they won't work in game, or vice versa. There's some weird stuff that happens. And I checked it in game too, and it was working fine. So I don't know what he was saying, or if it was maybe it was true that it wasn't working and now it works, but this is working fine for me. So Death Trap Trigger, on and equipped from a primary, increases your base critical chance by plus 40%. That is base critical chance. That is a gigantic increase. And increases base critical damage multiplier by plus 1.4 times for 4 seconds. Again, that's base critical damage multiplier, so that is a huge increase. Now, if you noticed, it says for 4 seconds. So if you watch a previous video of mine, the Lado Incarnon, very similar. I think it has the same evolution. I think it's called Death Trap Trigger there as well, where it's a holster style gameplay. You have to have a primary weapon, or I guess a melee would probably do too, that you can switch back and forth out of. You just, on PC, you just do an FF switch. You don't actually have to be in your primary for like 0.1 seconds, and then you get the Death Trap Trigger buff. So all you do is you fill up your Incarnon, you go into your Incarnon mode, you do a quick FF switch, and then you have a 4-second buff of massive damage. Normally, with the Kunai, about halfway through spending your Incarnon, you're going to have to do another quick FF switch, and then you'll get that damage buff again. It seems like a lot, but once you kind of train yourself, it's not really that bad. Now, for people that don't like that gameplay, because it is asking a little bit more of the player to kind of train yourself to do those like FF switches, you can use Survivor's Edge. It's a little bit more boring, and it's definitely weaker. So this is just increases base critical chance by plus 12% and increases base status chance by plus 12. It's still pretty good. It's just obviously not as good as base critical chance by 40 as well as the critical multiplier. But it's still pretty good, and it doesn't have the need for you to do holster switching. So the middle one here, accelerating volley on firing, plus 20% fire rate for 0.5 seconds, stacking up 5 times. Me personally, I do not like fire rate evolutions that change my fire rate, because, you know, in my head, I know how many seconds it takes to take out an enemy. And if one enemy takes me 1 second, the other one takes me 1.5, it just confuses me. So I don't like changing my fire rate as the game goes on. So accelerating volley is not really one that I would be looking at. It would either be Death Trap Trigger for the absolute best one, but if it's too annoying for you to do those FF switches, then you would be going with Survivor's Edge. And this weapon is still strong enough. Survivor's Edge is still going to give you a really good, strong weapon. Okay, and that's how you build out the Kunai with the Incarnon. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show this in about 10 minutes of gameplay in Steel Path Mott, and we'll see how many kills it gets at the end. I'm going to be bringing a Prisma Grokata with me just so I can do that FF switch. So I press F, it goes to the Grokata, and I immediately, I only have to be in this for 0.1 seconds, go right back to the Kunai, and I trigger Death Trap Trigger. Okay. And of course, I'm going to be doing this on a big dumb Anaros with no Archon shards that increase weapon performance, no mods or arcanes on the Anaros that increase weapon performance, and with a pet with no Sentinel weapon and no mods on the pet that increase weapon performance. Okie dokie, let's get into Mott here, and we'll show this little guy off.
These foes deserve your respect. Honor them.
Okay, so before we start, you see how I have the Kunai out right now, and you see that if you look in the top right corner right next to my HP bar, there's no buffs there. I'm literally just going to press FF as quick as I can. Boom, I get the 4-second Death Trap Trigger, and I still have my Kunais out. So you just need to do a swap, and that's it. You get that buff.
Life supply has been cut off. They're trying to.
I'm not too worried about doing the swap to the non-incarnate mode. I'm really only caring if I about this mode here. So I do a swap, and I go into this mode here. About halfway through, I'll do another swap so I can make sure I refresh it. And I go back into the non-incarnate. Filling it up. Incarnate, swap. About halfway through, another swap. I know holster gameplay is annoying for a lot of people. I do understand that. You always have that other option for the other weapon. Or the other evolution, I'm sorry. The fourth evolution there, the... Whatever was not Death Trap Trigger. Blast is really nice in this weapon too because it turns it a little bit more into an AoE weapon that you don't really have to... I guess you don't really have to be super accurate with this weapon anyway because it kind of auto-targets heads. It's pretty easy to tell if Death Trap Trigger is triggered because you won't be getting red crits if it's not triggered. You'll be going back down to like oranges and yellows. Let's get some headshots. It only takes 2 kunais to go to Incarnon mode, but I feel like sometimes it's a little bit hard on this weapon to get those. Maybe my aim is just poor. You know, my aim is probably just bad. Another thing to know about the weapon is that punch through kind of screws up the Incarnon form. So I wouldn't really suggest punch through on this weapon. It'll be fine for the non-Incarnon, like if you didn't have the Incarnon for some reason. But if you had the Incarnon mode, you don't really want to have punch through on this weapon. It screws up the homing of it for some reason. I did a bunch of runs this morning going back and forth between Viral and Blast. I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do the video with. So consider Blast too. If you're like, oh, you know, Blast would get me so many more AoE kills, you're probably right. You're probably right. It won't feel as good for individual dudes though. I mean, obviously these are starting Steel Path though, so they're just going to die in one hit regardless. But Viral will do more damage on individual dudes, but Blast will give you more AoE potential. The weapon has multiplicative gun CO, and so a lot of multiplicative weapons, you kind of, a lot of them you'll do like a rainbow build on, and like half of your mods will be like elements, so you can kind of bank a little bit more on the multiplicative nature of it. I don't feel like this weapon is the best to do that with, just because it actually has above average multi-shot, which is really nice. You don't want to dump multi-shot. It has really good crit chance and crit damage with the Death Trap trigger buff. So you don't really want to dump those either. And so I feel like if you want to bank on more multiplicativity of this weapon, it's just best to use an external with it. You know, maybe bring a mechanical hound with you to put some statuses on things. And you're still able to get all the nice crittiness of this weapon, the nice multi-shot. And then you can bank a little bit more on the multiplicativity of it. It's kind of nice you don't have to aim very well. I have heard on controller it's a little bit hard to aim. And I actually watched someone from our clan yesterday play on mobile. I didn't even know that was a thing. He was playing on mobile. And I was like, you know what? Non-AoE, like non-headshot builds are probably... Well, I guess this is a headshot build. But a headshot build where you don't really have to aim great is probably really good for mobile players. Like the Kunai Incarnon might be a really good weapon for mobile. Oh, oops, that was my bad. I FF switched 3 times. I did the FFF switch and I went back to my Grakata. Let's get that this guy out of here. The Guardian Eximus. See, it just chunks down the Acolyte there. No problem whatsoever. Auto targets the head. All right, we are at 6.5 minutes. We've got about 3 minutes left. And then we'll roll out of here. You'll get a good look at the Kunai and, you know, about how you play it. Remember, if you didn't want to use Death Trap Trigger, you're still going to do good damage. It might not be red crits. It might be like high oranges with some reds. But it'll still be decent, and then you don't have to do the FF switch thing, too. That's up to you, though. I don't mind doing the FF switch. I think it kind of makes the weapon a bit unique compared to others. I like weapons that act uniquely. Oh, there we go again with me using the Grakata. Did the triple F switch there. We'll see what our kill count is at the end. When I do these runs, average weapons are usually at about 500 kills. Above average and good weapons are usually at about 700 kills. And the really, really good meta weapons are usually 900 and over. So we'll see what this guy gets to. I think he's going to be between good and meta. I think he's going to be in that 7 to 900 kill category. I don't think it'll be as meta as something like the Torrid or the Bronco or something, because it's a little bit harder to use, and so, you know, it's not as easy as just aiming head height with a Torrid and killing everything in a room. But it's still pretty good. I'm going to guess maybe 750 to 800 kills. Got 1 more minute left. Let's try to get our kill numbers up. Trying to make this competitive against the other weapons. Oh, what am I doing? I'm like shooting the non-Incarnon. Go into Incarnon Assault. What are you doing, dummy? All right, 20 seconds left. Probably am able to get like 1 more burst of Incarnon out of here. And maybe another few more Incarnon shots. There we go. Okay. No more shooting. Let's figure out where the extraction is, and then we'll take a gander at our 10-minute kill count. Where is it? It's across the way here? Okay. So 10-minute kill count, 729. Pretty close to what I was thinking. I thought it was going to be like 700 to 800. So this is definitely a good weapon. It's not hitting the meta killing numbers that like the Torrid or some of the other best Incarnons in the game can hit, but it's still very good, right? It's still well above an average weapon.
Extraction is ready.
What is this, downstairs? Okay. So let's head to extract here. So pretty good weapon, though. I would suggest building it out. It probably has some combos with certain Warframes, right? Like off the top of my head, without thinking too much about it, is I'm thinking about Harrow. Harrow gets a lot of benefits for headshotting. I'm sure there's other Warframes that have some kind of benefits for weapons that headshot frequently. So I would say it's worth. Building out, having some fun with. So if you guys like the video, consider giving it a like. If you haven't subbed yet, consider subbing or tell me what I can do to earn your sub. And I hope you guys have an amazing day. All right, bye.